behind the exhibition, the art exhibition. After feeding ourselves with light language, we are entering another context, variety. We are entering a new context. Is there a program, a special secret program? Are there ET among all of us? Kerry Cassidy is one of the main representatives of the conspiration theory. She's impulsing a project which is called Camelot, and she organizes for her 164,000 followers conferences on YouTube where she touches all of these topics. She prepared something special for our Congress, which is a speech about ET among all of us and secret space. Please, big applause for Kerry Cassidy.
Permiso, déjeme pasar.
What the hell they want?
I assume you, ladies and gentlemen, have all seen tea. The hell are you at?
You can play that again. Actually, this is a clip from the, I think it's the Steven Spielberg mini-series called Taken. And it's a very short clip, and we will play it again so people can hear it again. So, can you play that Taken again, please?
Está en el canal 2, la traducción, canal 2.
So this is a scene from the television series. I don't know if you had it here in Spain, but it was called Taken, and it's all about abduction and the secret space program made by Steven Spielberg. I'm very happy to be here in Spain. We like Barcelona very much. And I guess we're going to start soon. I think they had to restart the computer, it looks like. So I think you have a mountain here called Mount Serrat, yes? And I just want to say that Mount Serrat is hiding a reptilian base, in case you don't know. And it is, on top of it is the Catholic Church. And this is very normal because the Catholic Church also, the Vatican sits on a reptilian base as well. So this is one of the reasons they mess with me, because I would tell you the truth about what's going on. So I know it might be a little shocking for those of you that are perhaps religious. So how many in the audience, while we're waiting, how many, and I hope I'm being translated. Am I being translated?
Yes.
Oh, very good. Okay. So how many in the audience are familiar with Project Camelot? Can you raise your hand? Raise your hand if you know Camelot. Yes? Oh, not very many people. Oh, no. Okay. Well, you're in for a big surprise then. Because I'm an investigative journalist, documentary filmmaker, for those of you who don't know. And I'm very notorious at this point worldwide. I have a huge YouTube channel, and I have interviewed, well, over 1,000 people from all walks of life, but I specialize in whistleblower testimony. And those whistleblowers come from what we call above top secret. So that means that they have clearances, working for intelligence agencies, black projects, the secret space program, higher, in some cases, than the President of the United States. And a lot of these people are military, ex-military, intelligence agents, supposedly retired intelligence agents, but as many of you will know, you never retire from an intelligence agency, really. Whether it's MI6 or CIA or NSA, et cetera, et cetera. You're always on call. They can call you in at any time. And so this is the kind of person I interview. Am I going to be able to, if we have to bypass the film, we can just do my presentation, if that's going to happen. So, let's see. I've been operational for 12 and a half years. Initially, I started Project Camelot with a partner. His name was Bill Ryan. And we worked together only 3 of those 12 years. And then we had some disagreements and parting of the ways. He went his way, I went my way. And I continued Project Camelot.
We are ready.
Sorry?
We are ready.
You're ready? Okay. Excellent. Are you going to play the video or skip it?
Okay, we'll skip that.
Are you going to play the audios or no? No audio either. Okay. Okay, I guess if you want to bring up my presentation. I don't know those people. Yeah. I'm sure we're getting close. I'm a very controversial interviewer. I ask what you call the hard questions. I go down the rabbit hole with my witnesses. Is it possible to back it up a few slides so it's at the beginning? Okay, so there's my name, Project Camelot, and we're going to be talking about the secret space program, which I have been investigating for over 12 and a half years in depth. And my YouTube channel has, it's about 198,000 subscribers and about 58 million viewers worldwide. So that's quite a few people. So I'm going to start out going through things that a lot of people already know, and then we're going to kind of climb the ladder of knowledge very quickly here because I've got a lot to cover. Can somebody tell me how long do I have to speak? An hour, 2 hours, what is it?
12 hours.
12 hours? I mean, if you like, I can do this.
45 minutes. 45 minutes.
I have 45 minutes. You're kidding. Oh, no. All right, I better go really, really fast. Okay. So everyone knows
An hour and a minute.
an hour and a minute. Okay. An hour and a half? Okay. Okay, so what we have here is just an image of the matrix. has everyone seen the movie The Matrix? Yes? Good. Okay. So, who are we? We are made up of at least 12 ET races. So we are a genetic combination of 12 ET races, and that is in different combinations. And some of us are more, let's say, Pleiadian, some are more lion beings, some are more Anunnaki, and some have more reptilian, like the Bush family, for example, and so on. There has been a genetic manipulation of the human genome since the very early days of the seedings of humanity, and we are actually the third seeding, what they call a seeding of humanity on this planet. And the reason for that is that the other seedings of humanity didn't work. So we are an experiment, you could say. This human vessel is an experiment. The spirit, the soul that inhabits this human vessel goes on to live on eternally as part of Source. So it is, you came here because you wanted to be part of this grand experiment, because there was a lot to learn and a lot to teach. So we teach and we learn. I recommend Ashiana Dean, who I interviewed. I recommend her Voyager books. They're available on the front page of Project Camelot, my website, Project Camelot. It's projectcamelotportal.com or projectcamelot.tv. And I'll try not to, hit this mic too much. There's lots of evidence of our ET visitation on planet Earth and the interference with our genetic, basically library, we are a genetic library, and a very rich one, very, very unique, as you can look around you and see all the different combinations of the races of various ETs. So there's no reason, in my view, to worship ETs. There's no reason to worship somebody that has better technology than you, because you should know that here on planet Earth, as above, so below, just because you have better technology doesn't make you a better person, does it? So Atlantis and Mu, most people will know about those early days. Atlantis, of course, fell and was actually, a meteor hit it. It was a targeted hit, a war of worlds that continues to this day. So the island actually split up into 3, and then eventually those islands themselves got sunk as well. So the survivors of Atlantis went to Egypt, and this is where the racial line was continued. There were many ET visitations in Egypt. Nefertiti and Akhenaten were both ETs. They are from different, as a matter of fact, not the same ET race. And you can tell this by looking at their facial features, their physicality. And if you've ever gone to Egypt and had the wonderful opportunity to go to the Egyptian museum there, you will see a wonderful statue of Akhenaten and see how very unusual he was. And he was Anunnaki, elongated head, and so on. And Nefertiti, who I believe was a slightly different race, and they produced some children as well, and they were guardians of the Stargate that is located in Egypt during the time they were, I guess you could say, in power, which was not very long. They occupied a part, they actually separated from Luxor, which is the original place where the establishment of the high priests in Egypt that were, you might say, they're kind of like the Catholic Church today. They were in charge of everything. And what happened with Akhenaten, as many people will know, he brought forward the idea of one God. He divorced himself from the current administration of religion at that time, and along with Nefertiti, They created a kingdom called Amarna. And Amarna, I have been to the place where Amarna was in Egypt, and it looks like a nuclear bomb hit it. It's absolutely reduced to rubble, to nothing. It occupies the lower part of a very wide valley. There's still some things in the hills where you can go inside those various sort of, they call them burial chambers, but they're just places where they did some carvings and things. But Amarna used to be a lush, beautiful valley filled with all kinds of, really like a jungle. And there were all kinds of beautiful structures there. And it at some point in our history, I'm not sure when, they actually must have thrown a nuclear bomb into that area. The Dead Sea is another place where nukes were thrown. These ancient races were not primitive in any way. They were as sophisticated as you and I are today. And many of you will be reincarnated from Atlantis and know exactly what I'm talking about. So at a certain point in our trajectory, and I'm not sure, I'm not great with numbers, but I think it was around 12,000 BC, the Anunnaki came to Earth and interfered with the humans here. And the humans were not, let me clarify something right away. We are not descended from apes or monkeys or any of that sort of thing. That's actually a complete lie. That's programming to make you think that you're less than you really are. And you came from the stars, as Bob Dean says, one of my witnesses who's quite famous, a military man who, he's still alive today, but he's quite elderly. As he says, you came from the stars and you will return to the stars. So you are not descended from apes. At any rate, back in 12,000, the Anunnaki had broken away from the Pleiadians. I have found out recently from one of my witnesses that actually the Pleiadians and the Anunnaki came from the same humanoid line of genetics, and so do us. So we're all related. The Anunnaki were infiltrated at a certain point in their history, and that means they were interfered with. There was an intervention, a reptilian race, the Draco, that interfered with the Anunnaki and took them over. And there was a hybridization program. So there's a confusion out there as to some Anunnaki are not humanoid. They're actually sort of a reptilian humanoid, half and half kind of being. But mainly Anunnaki are humanoid. And you can tell this by looking at the carvings on the walls of the temples in Egypt. And I just got back from Egypt. I was there leading a tour with Maria Wheatley, who is a dowser and someone who studies ancient archaeology, who came along with me. And we led a group of people and did meditations in the temples and had a wonderful tour of Egypt, pyramids, etc. And we're probably going to do that again next year, 2019, if the situation permits. So the Anunnaki came in, they interfered with us. There was a split. There's Enlil and Enki. They're the sons of who's called Anu. Anu, I understand, is actually a title. It's not his name. But that is the main being that they were the sons of Anu. And there's also controversy. There's a lot of disinfo put out about these two beings, but they were brothers. One brother was handling Africa and the other was the Middle East. So it's Enki that was the scientist and geneticist who was part of the Africa, given Africa to preside over, so to speak. And he did a lot of genetic manipulation. And there was Enlil, who was not such a friendly guy and wanted to control humans a lot more. At a certain point, there was what you call a frequency fence put in, and this is where you have our DNA that is not used at this point, or it's starting to become reactivated now, but there's a lot of mystery around all of that. So this is the time period in which the Anunnaki interfered with humans. that. Okay. So a lot of people wonder, what is the purpose of the secret space program? Why do they keep it secret? What are they about? And the bottom line is that they want to create a humanity 3.0. And I create this idea of, based on all of the information that I got over many, many years, as I say, from talking to people in all these different areas of disciplines and above top secret, etc. And it all gels down to a choice that had to be made between what is in essence angelic human, which is basically who our true nature is, versus a robotic Superman, which is what the secret space program has chosen because they want to have power over others. And they are going out into space, they are colonizing other planets, they want to make sure that they're the race on top. And so they're creating super soldiers, which is augmented humans that have special DNA, special powers, special abilities. You all have these powers and abilities now. However, a lot of them are not activated, you're not aware of it. You've been dumbed down through programming since day one when you came onto the planet. So there's a lot of forgetting that happened, and what we're really trying to do is remember who you really are. And the more you remember, the more sort of superpowers you will uncover as part of this amazing vessel that we call humanity. One of my witnesses is a physicist, and he worked in the secret space program for, sometimes these people work as many as 40 years, and then they have a crisis of conscience. They decide to leave their jobs. They know too much. They realize you're being lied to in mass, and they decide to come out and tell the truth. So Richard Allen Miller is what we call, he studied to become a magus, black magician, also a white magician. He's also a physicist, and he was instrumental, really, kind of like, I don't know, you might say a Doctor Who kind of figure in the secret space program. And this is a quote from him, basically saying there's two civilizations on Earth. So, and the space travel that they have, it goes interstellar. And I understand that people may doubt this information that I give you. All I can say is that this is based on whistleblower testimony, and I have a large amount of information. You know, if in America, if you are convicted of a crime, you go in and you have a jury, and they decide if you're guilty or innocent, and they basically can decide that based on the evidence. And so in this case, the evidence for what I'm telling you is absolutely overwhelming. They rule by secrecy, as you know, the Anunnaki. So NASA, it's kind of a joke, but it's actually true, never a straight answer. NASA, in many ways, is the PR arm for the secret space program. And I have worked for NASA as what you call a contractor. I worked for JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab. This is before I got involved in Camelot. And so I know something about the way they operate. And I have every respect for the scientists and engineers that are part of NASA. A lot of them are in the dark. Some of them are not. Some of them know they're having to lie to you and don't like it, but they have to keep their jobs. And some of them obviously have no idea, and they're just mouthing the stuff they've been told to say. The other agencies, of course, are in charge of secrecy. And really, in many ways, the CIA has become a worldwide organization and is very much part of what you might call the secret government that's really running the world at this time. And I have lots of dealings with the CIA, and I'm sure that they're listening to this right now. In fact, there's probably some agents in the audience and so on. MI6 and and CIA and NSA are like this. So there's not really much of a division there. There was a time when Camelot was told by secret witness that there was actually one man that controlled all these areas of the world. Whether that's still the case, I don't know, but that was actually what we were told. So a lot of people will know Ben Rich. He's the man standing here. He was head of what's called Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin. He said, you know, we have the tech to take ET home, and he wasn't joking. He also said a number of other very revealing statements about the secret space program and what they had achieved in the years that he was a member of it. The Anunnaki, there is a son of actually Enki called Marduk. You may know that there's a division of the Anunnaki and the black magicians that worship, for lack of a better word, Marduk. And the evidence that we have is that Marduk, it was a being that was brought back from Nibiru in stasis, that he's probably activated now, and that the New World Order was supposed to be ruled by him. So whether that's the case or not, that's basically what we were told. And that's what the Illuminati are expecting. Marduk is spent most of his time on Mars and was not a good son. He didn't follow in Enki's footsteps in a positive way. He's more like Enlil. Solar Warden is a part of the secret space program. It's an interstellar space fleet. And again, we have witness testimony talking about how Solar Warden patrols the galaxy. One of our witnesses is named Henry Deacon, actually came out here in Barcelona, of all places, to reveal that he'd been working on Mars. At the Exopolitics Summit, back several years ago now, maybe even, 7 years or something like that, he came on stage with me at the end of a speech by Bob Dean, and he announced that he'd been working on Mars as a scientist, and the people that were running the Exopolitics conference here in Barcelona told him to leave the stage. He was a Camelot witness, and he has given us a great deal of testimony. A lot of it is written, although I recently, not that long ago, maybe 2013, I think it was, I interviewed him on stage at one of my conferences in Los Angeles, and he talks about working on Mars and going through a jump room to get there. In other words, teleporting. Gary McKinnon is another famous witness that was interviewed by me in the very early days. How many people know who Gary McKinnon is? Raise your hand. Okay, a few, not some. All right, well, this is an English whistleblower, and this is a picture of him here. And he's a really fascinating guy. As a very young man, using a dial-up modem, this is the very early days of the internet, he tapped into the Pentagon computers and NASA and came across evidence of what are called non-terrestrial officers and the secret space program, what are called fleet-to-fleet transfers, meaning transfers of material while craft are up off the earth, and he basically got discovered, apprehended by the military. There was a fight to keep him in Britain, not to have him extradited to the United States because he would have ended up in Guantanamo Bay. His mother knew a lot of sort of rock stars and so on. She was involved in the music business. So she made him kind of a cause celeb, if you want to call it that, and kept him in Britain. To this day, he is I think he's out of house arrest at this time. There are certain things he's not allowed to do, but he never was extradited to the United States. But they tried to they tried to say he did damages to their computers. He actually said they had no passwords to protect their information. So, and that may be, actually back in those days, may have been the case. On the other hand, they could have actually done what is called created a honeypot, in which they were trying to catch hackers back in those days. So they would attract them, allow them to break in, and then decide who they're going to nab and make an example of. It's possible that Gary McKinnon was such a person. Unfortunately, when he went to trial, he did have a trial in the UK. They defended him saying he had Asperger's syndrome, which means he was socially inadept. But I interviewed him in person, and I can tell you he was highly, highly intelligent. And in my view, he doesn't have any more Asperger's than your normal human being, which you could argue that most people are socially inadept from time to time in various circumstances. The NRO, if you look at their emblem, is got an octopus sitting on the world. That is really their emblem. And that's indicating the octopus is said to be one of the first races of beings that are, the president going back to Truman and Eisenhower ever met. And you might remember there was a recent kind of a movie that had octopus beings in it. If you saw it, I forget the name of it. Anyway, so that's a secret, but nonetheless, the octopus is also a terminology for the secret space, secret government. It's often called the octopus, having many tentacles. And so you can see what the NRO is in favor of. The rogue civilization, again, Richard Allen Miller talking about this, Rich Dolan, who's written 3 very wonderful books called UFOs and the National Security State, highly recommended if you are still in the place where you're wondering if UFOs are real. He documents every sighting that anyone of authority or groups of people saw, and in detail, excellent books and highly recommended. And he or someone he was talking to referred to what the secret space program is called a rogue civilization. They decide for you what your future is going to be, and you have no vote. The vote is an illusion, and they decide what our future is going to be. They decide what's going to happen to your children, because they track your children from birth, and they either recruit them into their program and possibly take them off to Mars to work, or keep them here in an underground base as scientists, engineers, et cetera, give them a career path, or they decide that your child is not smart enough or whatever, not what they want, and they don't give them the opportunities that they should have. And there is, as you can see by this relationship, a relationship between the secret space program, secret government, and our surface government, which is basically a parasite versus host relationship. They feed off you. They feed off your energy, your talent, your hard work, etc. And they are basically keeping themselves alive in that way. So there's ways they recruit. They use hooks. They use mind control. They use, they shame people into basically submitting to their will. They make their employees sign non-disclosure agreements that have a clause in which actually states that they will be killed if they reveal the secrets that they're party to. So now I'm going to start going a little faster because how much more time do I have? 1 hour? Okay. So there are underground bases, there's Moffett Field, there's a gray human hybrid program. If you're not familiar with the gray human How many people are not familiar with the gray human hybrid program? Raise your hand if you're willing. Everyone knows about it. Excellent. Even the people that don't follow Camelot. Okay, great. Well, that means, you're being abducted. President Eisenhower and Truman made deals with the Greys, what are called the Greys, which those short little guys with the big eyes. There's so many different races of Greys, and there are some positive ones out there, but there are some very sinister ones as well that work for the reptilians. And they basically abduct you, they impregnate the women. A woman might carry the child for a short time, and then they abort it and keep it alive in their spaceships, etc. So you'll get young women that have had lots of children, and so on. And these abductions are real. They're not a fantasy. There's scientific evidence for this. And this has been going on now since the 1950s at least, and quite possibly before that. And so these presidents allowed the Greys to come and to select a certain degree of humans to do their experimentation on. The Greys' motivation is because they have sort of ruined their genetic line. They have no emotionality. That's why their skin is all sort of leathery and just, they're very skinny. They have no emotional life. And they chose a mental path. This is also a danger to humanity in a certain way. Those that are completely married to their technology, their computers, round the clock, lose their body, the strength of their muscles, et cetera, and tend to become very gray-like. So there's a military-industrial complex. There's lots of various alien races. Some of the most predominant ones are the Nordics, you may know of as the Pleiadians, which are also called tall blondes, but there are different races and genomes there. Greys, as I say, many races. Reptilians, different races of reptilians as well. And Draco. The reptilians are descended from the Draco. Okay, so there are lots of what we call allies and adversaries, meaning good guys and bad guys, if you want to put it in that way. There was an agreement called the Syrian Pleiadian Agreement, and with humans, and basically they tried to get rid of a lot of the secret agendas that the ET races had in coming here to Earth, etc. And according to Ashiana Dean and her information, and she is descended from a line of humans that have a special genetic code. She's in touch with what are called the guardian races, which is a group of various ET races. And she downloads information. She does not consider it channeling, but she's written these books called the Voyager books that are highly, highly sophisticated information, and actually more sophisticated than the Bible by far, about the history of humanity and all the genetic engineering and all the wars that have happened in space that are including humans and not including humans, but between these various races. So, and these are the guys that basically broke the agreement. So people that go around saying, they love the Ashtar Command and they love the Galactic Federation and they do exactly what they're told from them, have to be aware that some of these races have become more service to self, as we call it, than service to others. And that doesn't mean that necessarily every being that claims to be a member of the Galactic Federation has gone over to the dark side, but they have broken the agreement in mass, and there are issues there. So you get, you can think of politics on Earth, sometimes we're friends with, We may not be friends with North Korea, but we are trying to be friends with North Korea. So it's a little like that. So if you break an agreement between these various races to cause no harm, and then suddenly you change your mind as a group of people, then we're at war in a sense. So these are the various groups that we're at war with. And let me see, hold on. So the only race, according to, this was it's a little bit dated, so it could have changed, so it's a couple years old. Basically, the Enoch Jehovah Anunnaki Collective is one group of races that are still holding with the agreement. The Dracos have never made an agreement with humans to stay away, and so on. Okay, now I have lots of witnesses. Mark Richards, Captain Mark Richards, has worked in the secret space program for his entire life, and then he was framed for murder when he was actually off the planet on a mission. And his father also worked in the secret space program his whole life, and his wife, Joanne Richards, is out on the circuit talking about his story. Anyway, I've interviewed him 8 times. I've had to go into a prison in Northern California and interview him, and these interviews have become quite famous. He's a very interesting witness from way above top secret. He reached the rank of captain in the secret space program, which means he was captain of a kind of a Starship Enterprise type craft that went interstellar. And he was part of the wars that we are fighting with ETs over your head, even that go on right now. So there's various things you can say about them. The intervention, it's you know, what happens is the dark side will intervene. The light side, in theory, does not intervene directly on this planet. They have to work through you. And it's kind of a mandate. In other words, if you're positively oriented, you're trying to allow this human experiment to succeed on its own 2 feet, allow it to grow, allow it to stumble. You basically stand back a lot of the time. However, if the dark side does take an action, decides to invade certain part of the planet, the light side will step in. That creates what they call an opening, a door through which they can actually intervene if they choose. There's lots of reasons why our planet is invaded. Basically it's a water world. It is a genetic library that's quite amazing. Human females are, I'm not sure why, but there's something about our genetics and the makeup that makes us able to carry and to, I don't know if you call it mate with, but genetically carry the offspring of other races. And so that goes on. There's a lot of slavery, sexual slavery that includes reptilians, because reptilians feed off your bodily fluids, your emotional life, and your what's called orgone. If you know what Kundalini activation is, you create this orgone energy. On the West, it's known as orgone, and if you know who Wilhelm Reich is, a German scientist, he wrote books about orgone. That was the Western terminology. On the East, you get yogis that talk about activating the Kundalini energy. So those two terms mean the same thing. There is an early artificial intelligence that we generated and created here on the planet called Promise software. It then expanded to be a tracking software and now tracks everyone and everything. And has really progressed to become a real artificial intelligence, but it all started with what's called Promise software. Now I'm going through kind of quickly, I'm throwing a lot at you because I'm assuming that some of the people in the audience are up to speed and they're going to want to hear the newest information I have. So, I hope that the other people will Perhaps you'll get the recording of this, and then you can listen back and kind of do your own homework to investigate the things I'm telling you. Watch one of my 700, at least one, 700 interviews. I've done around 700 video interviews that are on my YouTube channel. And I did about 5 years of interviews on radio as well. Not all those people were whistleblowers, of course, but a lot of very good information. So it's kind of common knowledge. I think, I live in this amazing world in which everything is considered, and so I understand that some of these things may seem not commonplace to you. However, to me, it's completely commonplace just to understand why ETs would want to come here. Needless to say, they're related to us. So some of them are actually, as I say, guardian races, and they are interested in seeing how their experiment is coming along. Others are here to protect us as much as possible without interfering too directly. Others are here to plunder us, our talents, our children, etc. Thousands of people do disappear off the planet. I have another statistic later on that's a little more specific about that. There is some evidence that there are some interference with our nuclear weapons that are not meant to stop them, actually trying to encourage, for example, the US and Russia to be adversaries and so on. So you have, it's important to know that we are like in a war of worlds, that some people, some beings would like to see us go to war, have a World War III. We're kind of already in the preliminary early days of World War III, I guess you could call it. Definitely over Syria, in Syria they would say so. But, this is the kind of thing that has been encouraged by various ET races. So it's important to realize that, and kind of really hot all of it. It's important to realize that the secret space program is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. It's just simply that the way they organized it is linked up with the secret government, and they decided not to allow you to give them any input or feedback, and they also don't tell you the truth about what they're doing. So they have lots of what we call black projects, experiments to create a new humanity, to create, to terraform other planets, to create underground bases, to plan for the future, and they simply don't want you to know. That's, it's basically a culture of secrecy. It has lasted. It really, a lot of people like to say it was the US's decision after World War II because that was their mentality. I don't buy that. I know that there has always been a secret cult of those in the know, going back to the days of Egypt and quite possibly back to the days of Atlantis. But certainly it's become worse and worse over time. The religious overlays and the secrecy in order to convince you to believe in their fantasies around religion and to turn you into sort of worshiping idiots, it is really been going on for almost as long as humanity has been on this planet, one might say. So there have been presidents, at least in the United States, who fought against the New World Order. Of course, there are individuals in other countries who have as well. We may not know their names as much. So there is a sort of split also at the top, so that's important to know. There are wars at the top, even between the ones who want power over you. That involves basically, you know, what are Rockefeller, Rothschild, the Nazis and the Luciferians, and these people are switching sides also, and some are actually defecting to the light at this time. It's very difficult to do that once you've been in the Illuminati and a card-carrying member, as they say, but it is possible. And a lot of our whistleblowers, if you can understand the notion of what a whistleblower is, this is a person who has chosen a life path in which they worked for a time for the dark side. They may have completely believed the dark side, and then at some point they had a crisis of conscience and decided to come out at risk to their life, their children and their wives and their loved ones in order to tell humanity the truth about what's really going on. So that's a very interesting life path to choose, and I would recommend that we should honor our whistleblowers instead of trying to put them in jail. Now, the military is also divided. And in fact, there's evidence that our military is aligned with various different ET races. So you have the Air Force aligned with one race, you have the Army aligned with another, you have the Navy aligned with another, and so on. And it may be the same way in other countries as well, but it's definitely the way in what we call the secret space program, which is predominantly led by the Americans because they have the weaponry and technology and made the deals with the various alien races, and Britain, which has the money, as they say, and they are sort of hand in hand, and they're more or less, I think, in control, but working very closely with the Russians, the French, the Germans, the Australians, people from New Zealand, Spain. There's a very large American military base, you may know this, here in Spain. I'm not sure where it's located, but I think it may be in the vicinity of Mount Serrat. You know, maybe someone in the audience actually knows where it is. And it will have a large underground sort of part. And this is said to be the closest jumping off base for war in the Middle East. So Spain is very much a partner with countries like the United States in the secret space program. There is a movement. You know, what happened was originally when Eisenhower, I guess it was Eisenhower, made his deal with the gray ETs to allow them to abduct. And ultimately, he didn't really have a choice. They did make a deal in exchange for technology. But since that time, our military is not stupid, and they realized that they made a bad deal, and that maybe they shouldn't have done some of the things they've done. So they've tried to slowly reverse that trend. They tried to create treaties with the Greys to stop them from abducting just anyone and limit their abductions and so on. But the Greys are not, do not honor the treaties. So this type of thing still goes on. Now, as consciousness is rising on the planet, it is changing the playing field that the Illuminati and the secret government, secret space program is dealing with. And they know this, and it becomes harder and harder for them to control humans. So as technology and surveillance is escalating, your consciousness is also escalating, and the two are going like this constantly. So it's going up and up and up. And consciousness, the consciousness field, that is when you awaken, when you're aware of the truth, and you start to be discerning, and you start to be able to tell when someone's lying to you or not, That's cumulative, and as it grows, it's like the best analogy that I've ever heard is like it's like a beach ball that someone tries to push down into the water, you know, and as you push it down, it just pops up to the surface, and as you push it down harder, it pops up higher. And so it's like that. It's really quite fascinating what's happening on the planet at this time. So all is not lost. And I also tell people that, you know, you have to understand that if they didn't think you were very fascinating and feel that you had to be studied every second and surveilled every second, they would have thrown away the key and just kept you in these corrals they call cities and not thought about you again, basically gone off and done whatever they wanted to do. They certainly have the power and control to do so. But the reality is that they know you're made up of various ET races. They know that the incoming children are also made up of even more ET races. And they know you're all having contact even if you don't know it. And so they have to keep surveilling you to try to find out what's going on. And that's where you are actually in the driver's seat, whether you know it or not. Sort of covered that. Joseph Farrell is a very good author. Jim Marrs, who passed away recently, and Joseph Farrell really investigated the whole movement from the Nazis, you know, the German Nazis, and their technology. They were given technology, we found out from William Tompkins, another one of my wonderful witnesses, who himself was related to the Pleiadians, who disclosed a lot of information. I spent 3 hours interviewing him, and you can watch that on Project Camelot. But basically, these two authors, Joseph Farrell has written 10 as well. They really delve into the sort of trajectory, if you want to know how the sort of technology that the Nazis had has made it through to the secret space program today, and also is very in existence in Antarctica as well. And they have a Nazi base down there called New Berlin. And again, all this information that I give you, it's not coming off the top of my head. It's coming from the witnesses that I do interview. And most of the time, I have 3 or more unrelated individuals who are telling me the same thing. And that's when something has weight. And this is how even your intelligence agencies work. It's called triangulating data. And so this is one of the techniques we do use. That, along with my intuition, I am an intuitive. We're all intuitive, so, you know, that's common. But I do have abilities, proven abilities, that have played out in my life, so that I follow this indicators. I also can tell when someone's lying to me after doing this for so long, and so on. So basically the name, you might say, well, how do you win this war or these wars, and how does humanity survive? Aside from keeping in mind that the War of Worlds involves you and the people that you are related to, the beings that you're related to both on and off the planet. And we have plenty of ETs here, meaning recent ETs or purebred ETs that don't involve this particular human seeding genome. But you yourself are related to them. They have a vested interest in seeing you survive and this experiment be successful. So as consciousness rises, this is the success they're looking for, and we have become what's called an ascension planet. And that means that you will eventually be able to refine this physical body move into your light body, and move into other dimensions and leave this earth circulation of reincarnation, this sort of loop that you may be involved in, either out of choice or out of force once you get sucked into the game. But nonetheless, there are reasons why some people return to serve humanity, to serve this experiment, to see it successful. There are others who are going through the experiment themselves with a vested interest in learning more about, in essence, the creator, if you want to call it that. So this is just some more about the Nazis and Project Paperclip, where the scientists came over to work in the secret space program. This is the early beginnings of what we call the secret space program. In my view, you cannot analyze the political situation on the planet today without knowing about the secret space program, because it is the reason they do what they do. It is not for oil. It is not for the superficial things they tell you they're fighting about on the surface of Earth. They are actually doing a lot more, plundering this planet, creating colonies off-world, going interstellar, fighting wars on your behalf in some ways, and also planning your demise through chemtrails, through nano, turning you into what are called passive super soldiers, so that you will take orders, but the nano will actually enhance your physicality in certain ways that are not necessarily desirable, but will make you possibly stronger, bigger, stronger. There is an organization called Majestic 12, and it was created back in the day by Truman to handle the so-called ET situation when presidents started to become aware of the visitations here on Earth. And it continues to this day, and here are some of the various people that have been members of it. And they are actually a very strong organization. They have good guys and bad guys, if you want to call it that are part of that. They call them Scion at this time. There is a war for disclosure. It's not just going to happen. And I have to say that disclosure is coming from us. And this is the most likely place where you're going to get real truth and real disclosure is from the what they call the grassroots level. But there are also organizations like Tom DeLonge, To the Stars, that are made up of scientists who are very well known in the secret space program, by the way, and others. And they are attempting to have a disclosure that will do what is called spin it the way they want it to go. So they will not tell you everything. They won't even tell you half of what I've been telling you here, or even, you know, a quarter. They won't tell you almost, and they will lie to you, as they've already started to do with what are called the tic-tac sightings, etc. So that is a problem because they themselves are not in agreement on how to disclose the truth of the ET presence and your inheritance, who you really are, to you. And because they have kept this secret for so long and they've allowed humanity to starve, children to die, wars to be fought for nefarious reasons, individuals to be abducted, the gray human hybrid program is a huge obstacle that they're going to have to try to get around. So they're going to be motivated to lie to you because they don't want you to come, you know, and lynch them, you know, and hang them, you know, and put them on trial, etc. So they're motivated through Hollywood movies. They allow me to talk and say the things I do to small groups like this, and to make the information out there, and also allowing some of the whistleblowers to continue to go out to tell the truth without killing them. Some of them they kill. Some of them they allow to go on for a certain period of time and then they kill them. and so on. So it's a mixed bag, this thing people call disclosure. It is happening, but it is, in my view, it's very unlikely that you're ever going to get, a lot of people say the cliche, the President of the United States basically admitting that, you know, all of this is true. You will get some facsimile thereof. There is a, as I say, a space war happening, and there's a war on planet Earth, that we interact with these beings constantly. And at some point, also the ETs are pushing disclosure. Certain groups of ETs, including the reptilians, want disclosure out there. So they are making their presence, you know, sightings of them more known. So that the secret government, secret space program has to deal with that. They're trying to juggle all these balls, so to speak. So it's an interesting dichotomy, it's an interesting dynamic, and I can tell you that I've been told by a few whistleblowers that the Vatican wants to own this story. So there's also this fight over various agencies, you know, whether it be the CIA or the American government or the British government or whoever it is, or the Russians, to want to be the ones who are the first one to come forward to say unequivocally, you know, ET is here, and guess what? You know, all this is going on. So the Vatican, though, especially because they are, you know, they're run by the reptilians. They want to control you. They've always wanted to control you. I'm sorry to say they're a highly diabolical organization. And they have a vested interest in keeping you in a certain level of stupidity. So they want to own the story. They now have some priests, as you know, that are saying ET, yes, ET may come from God and so on. This is possible, you know, making a few statements of that sort. They want to own the story. They also want to spin the story the way they want you to see it, so they can stay alive, so to speak, as an organization. Israel is basically run by the British and the U.S. in concert with the people that are running Israel, the Anunnaki. And the Israeli bloodline is highly related to the Anunnaki. Many people know about the warnings that Eisenhower left before he died, basically kind of trying to admit to the danger of what is in essence the secret space program's secret government. Okay, now I'm going to jump forward, so bear with me. I have to go through these very quickly. And there's so much stuff. Okay, these are some of our whistleblowers, just so those of you who don't know my interviews, or if you haven't seen these interviews, I highly recommend them. These guys never came forward to show their face, but they have given us information. Anthony Dodd was a police sergeant, and he came and told us that they are tracking ETs here on planet Earth, basically like, let's see if I've got this. Okay, originally before he died, he came and testified to Camelot, telling us that there is a program in which ETs are being tracked and then killed in some cases, put in jail in others, etc., the ones that are here on the planet. And there was a television show that started in Britain called Torchwood. You may have seen the British version. There's also an American version they made a few years later. But it's basically about tracking human, in some cases they temporarily can look human, and in some cases they really are humanoid. But this is a very real program, apparently. So he told us about it, and then he did die, and now we put out his real name. Originally he had a fake name, John Roby, we called him. Bob Dean is one of our famous whistleblowers. Don't know if I have his picture here. And he basically has revealed a great deal without getting killed. more whistleblowers. Mark Richards. There's lots and lots of whistleblowers. That's Mark Richards. Simon Parks, some of you will know. I interview him quite often. And Timothy Good, excellent author. Timothy Good knows the real truth. He does interact with the high levels of the British government at times. This is Bob Dean. And he's a wonderful man. He says I turned him into a rock star. I've interviewed him many, many times. He became a very good friend. Lovely soul, actually. And he signed a security oath, but he was part of what you call the old boys network in the military, and even after he retired from the military. And he disclosed the truth of what he learned to humanity. So that's Richard Allen Miller, the Magus that I was talking about, physicist on the far left. I interview him a lot, so you can watch my interviews with him. Sergeant Clifford Stone, wonderful, wonderful whistleblower. He worked with the military on what you call crash retrievals, where the discs had actually crashed and they try to hide it, and they often had beings on board. He's an intuitive, what you call an intuitive communicator with ET. And he talks about that in my interview with him, and he's been interviewed by others, of course. Anthony Sanchez had some whistleblowers from Lockheed Martin contact him secretly with a very interesting story about something called Project Leonid, which is about, it's a network of nanosatellites that are artificially intelligent. And they put them up there. They're up there now. But the Lockheed Martin scientists got very concerned when they did a study and found out that ultimately there was like if I recall, a 60% chance that those artificially intelligent nanosatellites, meaning they're very, very small, would turn against humans. And they went on the run from Lockheed Martin. Some of the scientists started disappearing, dying. We don't know what happened to them. And they came and told their story to Anthony Sanchez. He's been out on the circuit. He wrote a book. He's actually written, well, a couple of books. He wrote a book about Project Leonid, but he was told not to publish. And I don't think he's published it to this day. I also interviewed him in person. And what happens with me interviewing people is that I tend to get them to tell the truth. So he went home that night, he went to sleep, parked his car in the garage, rolled up all the windows, like normal, locked it. And when he woke up in the morning, in the inside of the window was a note saying that if I published the interview with him, that he and his family would die. And I got a phone call, also about a day or so later, basically saying that I was told by an intelligence agent who was supposed to be retired but wasn't, that if Anthony Sanchez revealed any of the technical details he was told by those Lockheed Martin scientists, he would be considered un-American. And again, targeted, and his life would be in danger. So this is the kind of thing that, people like us, I've had death threats and so on. This is what goes on when you try to get the truth out. So if you think this stuff is not real, then you have to wonder why they go to such lengths to not only kill us, but also threaten us. Okay, we're moving ahead now because how much time do I have left? How much? 10 minutes? Okay. All right, we're going to go really fast now. So I have two primary whistleblowers right now, which is Mark Richards, Captain Mark Richards, and Eddie Page. And Eddie Page came forward at a UFO conference back in 1992 or 93, as I recall. I wasn't in the field at that time, so I did not see him speak, but he spoke at a conference in Vegas. He claims to be one of 33 children, and I'm actually going to have to go through. All of this is available on my website, so you're not missing anything. It's just that you have to go to the trouble to sit and watch the videos. And what I'm doing now is really giving you a quick overview of everything, right? And I'm also tying it all together. What happened was that both Captain Mark Richards and Eddie Page don't know each other. However, Eddie Page is said to be a Pleiadian who was brought here along with 32 other children back around the year 1947 from the Pleiades. That he is actually, his bloodline is actually Pleiadian. He's not fully human, if at all human. However, he looks just like a human being. And apparently, I think that they did make some concessions in order for him to fit in physically to this sort of place that we occupy on planet Earth. Because he ages and goes through those things that Pleiadians do not. Okay, this, I have to go forward. Sorry, it is great stuff. And if you want to get a copy of this presentation, I'll be happy to send it to you. So this is Eddie Page. I've interviewed him now twice on I have a YouTube show that I interview people every week. Sometimes I do around 3 interviews, depending on when people are available, etc. So it's not such a regular show. It's usually on Wednesday, Thursday, and Fridays, but it can change depending on the availability of my witness. So Eddie Page is a very interesting guy. He and the other 33, this is a secret document that he went on the run. He worked for the CIA for 10 years after he grew up. And he gave me documentation, and he has lots of documentation. He's releasing a book that's about to come out called Project Aquarius, all about the story I'm telling you. And there are legitimate top secret, above top secret documents that I'm not probably supposed to show, but you know, that he gave me, and he gave me permission to show, documenting his case, that the Vatican alerted the CIA about the incoming Pleiadian craft that was bringing these children, and that they would be coming to Earth, and the CIA then placed them with what appears to be fairly conservative families, you know, and then they grew up in those families. Eventually, they then moved to Langley. They actually lived on the premises of the CIA headquarters. All 33 of these kind of grown-up children, as they, I think maybe were in their 20s and 30s or so. And then in Eddie's case, he was recruited to work for them for another 10 years. Eventually, they all left Langley, decided that they didn't like the way the CIA was handling things, didn't agree with some of their philosophies, and Eddie was like the leader of sort of departing from the CIA. Anyway, he went on the run. He took his top secret or above top secret documentation with him, because one of the things the CIA does is they disappear your records, your documents, so that if you claim something that, you know, telling the truth about your history, for example, if your name is Bob Lazar and you claim you worked in Area 51, they disappear your college records, and then researchers say, oh, well, I couldn't find his college records, so he's not who he says he is. And this goes on constantly. It's called sheep dipping. Does. So Eddie Page, being very smart, a smart Pleiadian, anticipating the future, and he did tell the future while he was under the control or the watchful eye, if you want to call it that, growing up under the thumb of the CIA. And he has a lot of prophecies that came true. He saw, for example, the Kennedy assassination. He predicted it, and he was interviewed many, many times by the CIA prior to it happening. they made no effort to stop it, even though he gave them a great deal of detail. He's also accurately predicted the 9/11 fall of the Twin Towers and other things. And now he is predicting the future from here on out in his book. Eddie Page's story is fascinating, and I highly recommend that you watch my 2 recent interviews with him, which are available on my YouTube channel. All you have to do is go to YouTube and put in the words Project Camelot, and my channel should come up. And Eddie Page, just do a search under his name. If it's probably on the front page of my YouTube channel. It's definitely on the front page of my website, which is projectcamelot.tv or projectcamelotportal.com. 5 minutes? Okay. Now, this is some of the most controversial stuff that Eddie Page is saying. He says his father, his real father, is the head of the Pleiades, or at least certain planets in the Pleiades constellation, has been known as the god Jehovah, and is basically, when you talk about the God in the Bible, it's him. So that's his father. But keep in mind, of all the millions and billions of planets out there and, you know, various civilizations, et cetera, this guy is not a god. He's only referred to as a god, but he is not the God. So if you want to call it the creator of everything, he's not the creator of everything, but he claims to be the creator, the original seed from which humanity, this experiment, came. So this seeding of humanity here on planet Earth. So he's related to all of us. And he is also the father of Enki and Enlil, and the Pleiadian bloodline, as I say. And this is what Eddie is claiming. Now, what happens is he was in the military as a young man, and he was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam. He was shot down. Everyone who was with him died, and he engaged in a gun battle with the Viet Cong, in which he received bullet holes all over his body that should have killed him, but didn't. And then he ran into the jungle after shooting something like, 50 of them. I'm not sure how many. And this was all witnessed by generals, apparently, and other parts, troops that were there at the time. And then he went through actually a court-martial to prove whether it was true or not. And they had to decide that he was actually telling the truth. At any rate, he received all these wounds. He disappeared into the jungle. He was found 500 miles away 11 days later. During those 11 days, he claims that he was taken onto a Pleiadian ship, that they basically healed all his wounds, that he met with his father again, and so on. He is known as someone that the Vatican and the CIA take very seriously, and he does have the documentation, it appears, to prove it. So there's a lot more investigation has to be done. He's going to become more vocal and come forward in various other ways besides my interviews, so you may be hearing more about him. One of the things he says is not so much that Jesus is coming back as his father is coming back. And in fact, during one of my interviews that night, I guess earlier, he said that a Pleiadian mothership had just come into our atmosphere, or the area around our planet. And he also claimed that there have been, for many, many years, these 7 very diabolical sort of kill machines that have been guarding this seeding of humanity and planet Earth, as well as these 33 children that are all descended from this Pleiadian sort of head father figure. He is claiming that the Dracos have been invading and fighting with various ET races, including the Pleiadians, going back millennia. And all of this is, again, documented in the Ocean and Dean books, if you're interested. But he's now claiming that why the mothership is here is in part to deal with the impending Draco invasion that's going to happen here at planet Earth. And that is, I guess, going to be kind of a wake-up call that goes way beyond disclosure. And he does talk about the nukes that have that are really, scientists can tell you that nukes have been exploded in prior history when humans weren't supposed to have that technology. So there are indeed, like the Dead Sea, etc., evidence of this. And he's basically saying that the history is repeating itself. There's going to be, as I say, another war with the Draco. He's also predicting in the next, this is an interesting thing because you had this, I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but earlier speaker who talked about the UMO and their story, and that they were claiming that either in 2019 or 2021 there was going to be a big event, right? Well, Eddie and his 32 other Pleiadians are all in agreement that there is something coming, which may be this invasion, but it's also going to involve, volcanic eruptions, pole shift, all these things that you might have heard about many years ago that didn't ever happen, by the way. But that we've had some pretty severe volcanic eruptions lately and that they're going to escalate, etc. And basically saying that the New Madrid Fault is going to go and Yellowstone is going to blow and the United States is going to become it's going to break down into civil war. He's predicting all kinds of things in his book. Now, it doesn't mean that it's true, doesn't mean it'll happen, but it does mean that this guy has been right in the past. So it is kind of interesting. And if he is who he claims to be, he may have some backing that goes beyond human. And he's given credit, I actually have read his book. So his book is not out yet, it's over 700 pages. And I have to say I don't agree with a lot of it, or some of it. And I certainly don't know one way or the other whether this, this thing that people have said and talked about is, pole shift, etc. We have gotten evidence during my 12 years in Camelot from other witnesses, including Henry Deacon, that such things were predicted to happen. But they have not happened yet. So we don't know whether this is just another sort of prediction that won't happen, or whether there's some sort of, it's kind of like calling wolf one too many times. We just don't know. He's thanking these particular groups for helping him in his journey. So you're getting a preview of a book that's about to be released when I'm telling you this information. There is a guy named Valiant Thor that apparently is real. They've made a lot of recent sci-fi movies about this character, but apparently he's Pleiadian. And Eddie and the other 33 are considered to be high priests of the Pleiadians, and they have certain abilities, powers, whatever. Now, none of this has been demonstrated necessarily, other than his predictions coming true that he made when he was a kid. So we can't really know. I do know that he did work for the CIA, that's documented and supported. There are, this is just an indication of the space war going on. It's a statistic, so to speak, because some people really love statistics. And it tells you how many planes were lost, etc. And this is directly, his group, the 33, worked for the CIA, as I said. They lived on the premises. They had their own area, and they were guarded, heavily guarded, apparently. But during that time, they did a great deal of research. And so a lot of the research that he did shows up in his book. is the one, for those of you that have followed the genesis of what are called the MJ-12 documents that prove that there is such an organization called MJ-12, because a lot of people like to pretend that it doesn't exist, even though it does. And there's a father and son duo, Ryan and Bob Wood, who have basically created a website, and then they went through the documents that were delivered to a mailbox of this person. And Eddie is claiming that he and his group are the ones that gave them the MJ-12 documents. And Stanton, according to his documented evidence that he puts out, he's had a correspondence and the sympathy and Stanton Friedman, who is a nuclear physicist who is very involved in the UFO field and has worked in essence for the CIA. He does supposedly agree that Eddie is who he claims to be. And he's done it in writing, and he has shown me that document. There's a lot about Roswell that is not true, that are lies, etc., that he knows the real truth, he claims. And so I'm kind of basically leaving you with these questions. So you can watch my interviews with him. You can read his book when it comes out. What you really need to do is figure out, if indeed his father, the father of the Pleiades, is the same God as in the Bible, which it appears he is, and if Jesus is his brother, as he claims, and that all of this is all centered on the Pleiades and not to do with the creator of the universes, multiverses, et cetera, and so on. And so that the Bible, and he believes that religion is full of lies, that the Vatican has been lying to you for centuries, etc. So he and I agree on that point. And then you can also say, well, what if the Pleiadian 33, even if they were from Pleiades, maybe they were mind controlled to think some of this, to believe that there's going to be a pole shift, et cetera, et cetera. We just don't know. These are questions you need to ask. But this is what he's claiming. In other words, he's claiming a pole shift, he's claiming a war of worlds, he's claiming the invasion of the Draco. So these are pretty strong claims, and he's claiming these are going to happen. That's imminent, as they say. And then I have some visuals, but we can sort of, while I go through the visuals, I'll just flip through them and you can, close this down. This is his helicopter. This is one of the sessions in which he was giving prophecies, a Q&A session, when he was much younger. These are some photographs of his group of 33 meetings they had when they were younger with some visiting Pleiadians. Another above top secret document. Eddie, I believe, he is in the middle. These are two friends. I think this is my last slide. Maybe not. Oh, no. Okay. Well, Giza was an island. I just have a few things. That's a triangular UFO. It's a very accurate picture. Phil Schneider, wonderful man. If you haven't investigated the Phil Schneider testimony, a real whistleblower, I honor him with, by drawing your attention to him. He was around before my time. This is Malta. That's actually me going just through some stones in Malta, a temple place, but it was remarkably like a Stargate, so I put that there. This is from Göbekli Tepe. We went to Göbekli Tepe. We were the only sort of, I guess you might say, tourists, white people in the whole area. And in Turkey, southern Turkey, right when the war with Syria broke out over the border. This is a mantis, a praying mantis being holding a human on his lap, on its lap. And this is in the museum that is associated with Göbekli Tepe in the city of Urfa, and that we were at. And this came from Göbekli Tepe. It was unearthed. There's a lot of hidden relics that were dug up in Göbekli Tepe. They're not showing you, that show the genetic manipulation of humanity and our predecessors. And that's it. Cat beings, dog beings. And that really is my last slide, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you very much.